Does that get us?
Yeah. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get this board meeting started of the Air Quality Management District on April 25th at 9:03 a.m. If the clerk could please call the roll.
Carr. Here. Daniels. Frost. Gaylord. Here. Guerra.
Here.
Hanson.
Here.
Harris.
Here.
Kennedy. Lamson.
Here.
Lee.
Here.
Natoli.
Here.
Peters. Cerna.
I'm going to have to leave at 20.
Terry.
Go to the Senate meeting.
Thanks.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. If everyone could please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Salute, pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If the clerk could please read the board clerk announcement for the televised audience.
Sure. This meeting of the Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District is cablecast live without interruption on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on Comcast, Consolidated Communications, and AT&T U-verse cable system. This meeting is being closed captioned and will be webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. Today's meeting will be repeated on Saturday, April 27th, 2019 at 2 p.m. and Sunday, April 28th at 4 p.m. on Channel 14. Members of the audience wishing to address the board should fill out a speaker form located on the table at the back of the chambers and give it to the clerk. Please speak into the microphone when addressing the board and state your name for the record. Also, at this time, please silence your cell phones until the conclusion of today's meeting.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. We do have board members that have to leave 20 before 10, and we may lose a quorum. We have a brief APCO report, the consent calendar, and then our fiscal budget to take action. So we're going to be prudent with our time, but we're going to go ahead and start with our APCO report.
Thank you, Board. Good morning. Good to see you all. We have a few items that we'd like to. Thank you. A few items that we'd like to discuss with you. We'll try to go through this quickly because we do need consent quorum for a number of items. We're going to start off with a report back to the board on the trade mission to China that we participated in. Mr. Jaime Lemos is going to give you a report. He's our acting director for our transportation group, and he was part of the 25-strong delegation, I think, led by Mayor Steinberg that recently went to China.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. My name is Jaime Lemos. I'm the acting division manager for the Transportation and Climate Change Division. And Director Patrick Kennedy and I had the opportunity to participate in this delegation to China that the Mayor, Darrell Steinberg, had set up. And the focus of this mission was trade. Trade in smart food, smart infrastructure, smart mobility, smart health, and smart power. In China, we visited 3 different cities, Beijing, Chongqing, and Shenzhen. As our director mentioned, there was 25 participants from the public, private, and academic sectors. The sectors represented agriculture, data, education, public utility, transportation, and government. Our focus was the California Mobility Center, zero emission and autonomous vehicles, smart cities as it relates to transit-oriented developments like 65th and Aggie Square, and autonomous vehicles. On the top left, this is in Beijing with the Beijing Municipal Transportation Commission Operations and Coordination Center. This is the DOT of Beijing, and Director Kennedy, SAC-RT CEO Henry Lee, and the City of Sacramento, we got to meet with this, the TOCC here, and this was a representation of big data and how they collect data for congestion mitigation measures. The far right graph of that picture represents all of their transportation, their light rail system, their subway station, their trains, and their public transit buses, and even their taxis. And in addition, 30,000 volunteers, light-duty passenger vehicles. There's a number on that slide that says 5.2. I'm not sure if there's a pointer here. Well, there's a 5.2 up there, and that's their congestion number. So at that moment, in the city of Beijing, that was their congestion, 5.2 out of 10. So it was really a really great collection system in which they monitored congestion. On the far right, top right, I'm sorry, is a Sacramento City Partnership signing ceremony with the mayor of Chongqing. And there we talked about trade. They really wanted cherries, and they also wanted a direct flight from Chongqing to Sacramento. So Sacramento County, I think that might be coming up your way. On the bottom left is one of the smart city stores that we visited, Alibaba. There again is about big data, the collection of data as different people purchase, which makes the buying and the transportation of goods more effective and more efficient. That way there's no excess products. There was only one clerk in the entire store, and the store was probably the size of like Costco. Everything else was pre-order via app or through this digital kiosk here. On the bottom right is our mayor talking about the opportunities of smart investments in Sacramento. And this is at the Department of Foreign Affairs Office of Chongqing Municipal People's Government. We got to visit many different sectors, as I mentioned, agriculture, industry, big data, and of course, I was really excited that we got to visit Jinkang New Energy Automobile Company in Chongqing, and they're in the process of developing EVs. This is their new SF5, still around 90 to 120 mile range, so they haven't broken through the 200 plus range, but as you could see, it is very cool looking, and they're trying to make the vehicle affordable somewhere in the $35,000 to $45,000 range, equivalent here in the US. On the top right slide is the autonomous rail rapid transit. This is still in their piloting phase, but this is something that we're considering for the streetcar project. It's something that we've been looking at with SAC-RT and the mayor's office, and so this is an idea. We did not get to see this in person since it was still in the pilot phase. On the bottom left, we have the EV transit. This was very exciting, and of course, Director Henry Lee was very excited to see this. In Beijing, there's over 10,000 EV buses, and in Shenzhen, over 16,000 electric buses. So if Beijing and Shenzhen can do it, then Sacramento can also do this here. In Beijing, Chongqing, and Shenzhen, all of the taxis are electric. So this is a great idea as we start looking into Uber, Lyft, and all of any other ride-sharing transportation modes. And finally, on the bottom right slide is we went to see a facility called BYD, which stands for Build Your Dreams, and this was in Shenzhen. And they have a massive portfolio of equipment, which includes cell phone batteries, power banks, electric light-duty, heavy-duty vehicles, such as cement mixers, refuse trucks, delivery vehicles, transit vehicles, and monorail trains. They also have a facility here in California, down in Lancaster, and so I think in the near future we may be putting a visit together for that. But that was our trip. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lemus. So autonomous trains and cherries, good trade partners. Dr. Ayala.
And obviously, again, to emphasize, why do we care? Why do we get engaged? Transportation is the biggest source of air and climate pollution emissions. So we need to educate ourselves and be current in terms of the future solutions. And obviously, China is the biggest auto market now, so as China goes in this sector, that's where the world is going to go. Moving on, just want to bring the board up to speed on AB 661. This is an item that I discussed at the last board meeting, and what I want to note for the board is two things. Director Hansen and I testified as witnesses for Assemblymember McCarty in support of the legislation, and the legislation was amended to apply only to our air district. So we are going to be running a pilot, but again, it's all about getting ready when the next fire hits. We want to be better prepared. We provided the actual bill language as it stands at the moment, so you have that in your package. The next item is another important item for us, and those of you that are on the Sacramento RT board, I'm sure have heard from my good friend, Director Lee, about this issue. We are very supportive of the idea of a green means go program that SACOG is trying to put in place. We understand the need. We understand the fact that the 19% target that we're trying to meet as a region is going to require additional investment from the state. But the thing that I need the board to be aware of is this cannot be at the expense of some of the programs that we ourselves are trying to generate. The reason I'm raising this concern to you is there is obviously very clear nexus between the things that we want to do and the things that SACO wants to do with the cap and trade funding, the greenhouse gas reduction fund that the state is managing. So I think naturally, and I have no doubt that SACOG, with the support of the board, is going to succeed. Naturally, the state is going to be looking at this and saying, okay, SACOG has got the funding for the Green Means Go program. Why does the Air District need funding for some of our mobility options? That's the thing that we're trying to avoid. And again, this is just simply to make you aware. Obviously, we're working with SACOG very closely. We appreciate the collaboration and the support from Director Corliss. So more to come in the future. But again, I just wanted to make you aware.
Okay, we've got a couple board members signed up on this one. We're going to go with Board Member Hanson first, then Board Member Natoli. Board Member Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Alberto, for bringing this up. We had a very active discussion of the Regional Transit Board about this. It hasn't come before our City Council, but there are some significant concerns that this will prioritize just electric vehicles and not really invest in either transit or other smart programs that would reduce our base of VMT. And that also coincides with a couple challenges that I think particularly would impact us as the largest air district. Is it seems like a lot of this funding is geared towards the counties outside of Sacramento, and the design of this program for those counties that rely on very far-flung commutes to help. And I just don't think we'll compete well in the way that SACOG has designed this program, whether it's as an air district, as a county, or our entities. And we asked for changes in the design of the program at Regional Transit, and I don't know if you're recommending any challenges like allowing the air district to apply for funds. But I know at that point, transit agencies, and I don't believe air quality agencies, could apply for projects and proposals, that it was really only certain jurisdictions and certain types of projects that would qualify. And so $400 million is a lot. We haven't gotten our fair share of cap and trade money for affordable housing, for transit, for other things. And so I'd worry that this program does tell the state, this is all we need. We don't need other money. And then when the program comes through, assuming it does, we're cut out. And I think that would be a real problem. So I'd encourage you and our lobbying team to really continue to advocate for the district and for Sacramento County at the table.
Thank you, Board Member Hanson. Board Member Natoli.
Yep. I would just echo some of the comments that Director Hanson made. I think his description of the discussion at RT of being robust, it was all of that. And I think you're pointing out, Alberto, the concerns as it relates to competitive funding and other funding streams that are important to this air district, important to the regional transit district, certainly important to our communities in this county and in the region as a whole. It's not to take away anything from an initiative that obviously tries to bring additional dollars and additional support for things that will help us clean our air and become mobile in a way that is smart. But I would echo what Director Hanson said, that I think certainly you as the leader of this district and certainly this district board interest in seeking funding that will be important to things that we need to implement that may be closely aligned or maybe a little different than, and one of the risks I think we do run, and I'm not yet convinced that we don't run that even with an application that has good support is that if we're successful in getting $400 million, yay for us as a region, but what does that mean then to the various districts that also rely on those state funding streams to implement very important measures that without we're not going to be successful. And so I would just, again, encourage you as well, and certainly want to be sure I put that on the record this morning. Thanks.
Well, thank you very
Board
much.
Member Natoli.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I very much appreciate your support, and that's precisely why I wanted to bring this up to you.
And the only comment on that I would say is that if we are going to be strong as a region, then this is, I think, incumbent upon our APCO, our executive director from our team, and our executive director from SACOG. All of us represent different parts of those bodies, but we have to come forward with a strong, solid message when we're going to the state. I think that if we're going to be successful, it's the unified effort that's going to be helpful. And that communication, and I do want to thank our Dr. Ayala for his continuing to work and meet regularly with those directors so that we continue to have that communication. I know historically that may not have been, but I think what we need to do moving forward is it's not about the air districts, not about SACOG, it's not about RT, but it's how do we bring more dollars for the region.
Thank you so much, Director Guerra. That's the crux of it. That's precisely it. The conversation I'm having with Director Lee and Corliss is it's up to us to tell our story before the state, why we're all running very important and different programs that need the funding.
Great.
And as you are suggesting, my thing is I don't want the success of SACOG to count against us when we're trying to develop our own programs.
Board Member, I think it says Kennedy, but we'll call him Harris today.
Okay. Thank you. I'm very happy to be a supervisor. I've wanted this position for quite a while.
You may only be happy for about 5 minutes, but go for it.
It'll be a great 5 minutes, Don. And here I am next to you. So, you know, one thing that can happen with various organizations is that they can silo. And there's always a benefit in being united. Yeah. So there's a benefit to Green Means Go. It's just that the way it's presented has created fear amongst a couple of our organizations. Certainly with RT, there's a significant worry. There's also, I think, benefit to looking at this as an opportunity, because if we are united as a region, it could be that we could be more successful at the state. So certainly we have to work out the kinks. There's no doubt about it. I wouldn't just walk away from Green Means Go. I see benefit in it, but we do have to get the directors on the same page. And, you know, that really is up to you and Henry to work with James to talk about these issues in a very real fashion, and I believe we can get there. You know, I do see a lot of benefit in presenting a united front to the state. I think that we could possibly capture more cap and trade funds in that way. The distribution, of course, is a different matter, but these are things that need to be taken seriously. But it is really up to our directors with the support of your boards, because the support is there. And if we can work out those issues, then perhaps we can gather more money for the region.
Well, rest assured, Director Harris and Board, that we're definitely having those conversations and working together. Absolutely.
I concur with Supervisor Harris's comments here. I'm looking at the time here, and I want to make sure that we have time for action. So a little unorthodox, but can we come back to the balance of your APCO report after we conduct our voting business?
Absolutely.
We're going to move to our consent calendar, and I'll ask a motion from the board for a consent calendar. It's been moved by Board Member Harris, seconded by Board Member Terry. Hanson. That's what. Supervisor Harris. Oh, good. Jeez. Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay. Consent calendar passes. We're going to go to our fiscal year proposed budget here. Board members, what I'm going to ask is, this is about a 10-minute report, and so if we could keep our questions till the end. It is a public hearing, so we'll have to open and close the public hearing when appropriate.
Ready. Good morning, Chair Guerra and directors. My name is Jamil Moons. I'm the Administrative Services Division Manager for the district. It is my pleasure this morning to present to you the proposed budget for fiscal year 1920. This morning, let's see if we can get that going. This morning, we're going to talk very briefly about the development process, about an update on our new financial system, which most of you are aware we've recently implemented, and then get into our budget and talk about the current year proposed budget, the difference between the current year and the proposed next year, as well as some forecast trends and our proposed fee increase. So the budget development process is an annual process. We will be back here again next year at this time in the same process. The most important pieces of this are that we develop the budget and then we meet with the budget subcommittee of the board. So we did that this year on March 13th with the committee and got their direction to bring this item to you today. We will have the public hearing today, which is our first public hearing, and we will have another public hearing next month in May, at which time we would look to have the budget approved. Very briefly, we did transition to a new financial system this year, which required us moving off the county system and moving all of our funds to new banks. And we have an investment fund up with the LAIF, which is the majority of our funds are maintained there, and then operating funds in a local union bank. This new system has allowed us to do much more robust reporting, to break down some of our funds into what we call managerial funds for better tracking, better cost accounting, and so we will have greater transparency in those values and ultimately long-term efficiency. This year and a little bit into next year, it's been trying to run two concurrent systems, so our efficiency is not quite there. Implementing a new system is a heavy lift, and the finance team has done a fantastic job, as well as all the district, moving over to a new system. But we're very hopeful and optimistic that it will provide great returns in the future. Just a note on the budget document that you did receive, there are some very minor changes to this document from last year. We used to have what we called a debt service fund. That was a separate broke-out fund that has been incorporated into our building fund, our proprietary fund. We worked with our accountants and auditors, and that was a great way to manage that. I did want to comment on that. And there are some minor changes to account names and transitions from last year's to this year's. So our proposed budget is a budget that helps us implement all the priorities and initiatives that the district has. You've been hearing about them with the APCO reports for the last several months, and they're obviously meeting our climate goals. We have the new Community Air Protection Program, which you've heard a lot about. That has affected our budget. It's an infusion of some additional funds, both operating funds as well as incentive funds, and you will see that reflected in this upcoming year's budget. Some of the directors are new, so I just want to take 30 seconds to go over the funds. So when you do read this, and for those directors who have seen the budget before, just a reminder, the 100 fund is our general fund. That is where all of our staff and our capital projects and everything is managed out of that fund. The 400 fund is what's called a proprietary fund. It's a special accounting treatment, governmental accounting treatment, and it accounts for our Colville administrative building. It's a very stable fund, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The last fund, the 500 fund, you will see a lot of money in that fund coming in and going out. That reflects only our incentive projects. So all the incentive funds that we receive flow through that fund. So here is our proposed budget for FY 19-20. We have $65 million proposed in revenues and just over $59 million in expenditures. I will break down each one of these on this next slide a little bit more. So in the general fund, as I mentioned, that's where our employees and a lot of our capital and where what we consider our operating budget. This year's approved budget was $21.7 million. We're moving that to $22.9 million for a net increase of $1.2 million. The proprietary fund is a very small fund. It's very stable. All it does is record the in and out of our building, the rents that come in, the outflows that go out to pay utilities, things like that. Very, very stable fund. Special Revenue Fund, as I mentioned, is our much more volatile fund with influx of those incentive grants that are coming in and the outflows of those incentive grants. So we are proposing to put, this year, we said 23 million in incentive projects out into the community. Next year, the team is forecasting to put 35 million out into the community incentive grants. So that's a pretty exciting number. For the general fund, just some notable changes for the increases there. On the revenue side, we are getting an increase in the CAP, the Community Air Protection Program funding this year, in the upcoming year over the current year. The Measure A fund has gone up about 5.5%, which reflects about a $100,000 increase, which is definitely helpful. And interest is increasing slightly from our new investment in the LAIF. We have some minor decreases. Our CCAT Enhanced project, where we scrap our old vehicles and we get that salvage revenue back, that's proposed to decrease about $50,000 in addition to some other minor decreases. But for the most part, I would call our revenue a break-even. Our permitting fees are about the same, our ARB subvention, our EPA grants, all of those are pretty level. We will, at the end of this presentation, ask you to consider for next month a fee increase adjustment for 3.6%, a COLA on our permit fees. That's still projected to be about a break even because we are losing several permits on one of our major Title V, our Aerojet facilities. So that's going to be about a break even as well. So our revenues for the most part are break even going into 1920. On the expenditure side, we have two main areas of increases. One is for employee services. Our COLA is costing about $200,000, plus some additional amount for the step increases that employees receive, and our pension and benefit costs. The other area is capital projects. We do have an increase because of the CAP program, the Community Air Protection Program, of about $700,000 in capital projects. On the decrease side, the good news is we have been working very hard to streamline our professional services contracts, and we are realizing a savings of a little over $200,000 overall in our services and supplies area. And we are, because of the incentive grants coming in, we are seeing a nominal increase in that transfer of funds over to help offset some of our staffing costs to put those projects out on the ground. There are no staffing changes being recommended in this budget. The board did take some action in January and March to get our FTE where we needed them, to get some additional staffing and a limited term capacity on board to address those new community air protection programs and restore some core critical district programs. Looking at the trend going that we have come from on fund balance, overall you would see the district trend line at the top there increasing significantly. That's a reflection predominantly of, as I mentioned, those special revenue funds, that large influx of grants and the rate at which they come and go out. They're multi-year grants, so one year you might get 35 million in, but you only put 25 out. The next year you might get 20 million in, but you put 40 million out. So there's a lot of volatility in that one. But focusing on the blue line there, that is our general fund. And as you can see, we do have a structural imbalance and a deficit that has been decreasing gradually over time, with a projected use of fund balance again this year to shore up that balance, to run our core basic programs here at the district and run those incentive projects. So looking forward, excuse me. As I've mentioned, our labor costs are outpacing our current revenues. We have negotiated contracts of COLAs between 2% and 4%. This year it's 2.4%, so it's fairly nominal. But again, as I said, our revenues aren't keeping pace with some of those costs. In addition, restoring some of the positions that we have to continue doing the program. As you know, last year we held several vacancies, over a dozen vacancies, to help restore and reserve and take a break and pause and get us on track. And we've come back to the board with our stated challenge and some solutions, which I'll be talking about in a moment. As well as on the incentive grant side, the amount we get to implement the grants doesn't always cover the cost of implementing those. So while we're bringing millions and millions of dollars to the region, we need some local revenue funds, and our funds are the funds we have to spread between all our needs, as well as getting those incentive grants on the ground. And what are we doing? As I said, we took a pause, we prioritized, we focused resources on our most critical, important programs, and we're continuing to invest in technology. We've managed to save some positions by the use of technology and reallocate some positions and just decrease some positions in some cases as well. And we've brought to you a revenue development strategy, which I'd like to briefly review again today. This slide reflects what we call a middle path. When we came to you earlier in January and we did a presentation on different revenue streams that we could be looking at and considering, we took a high and a low kind of perspective. But for the forecast, we needed to land sort of on a middle number that we thought would be fairly reasonable and hopefully somewhat achievable. So reviewing those again, the Measure A is a measure that's going out to ballot in 2020, we believe. We're very active, Alberto and I and other members of the district are participating on a group process to look at that and to work on that measure with STA. And the next one is the per capita, which we've mentioned before, per capita fee. And again, our director and some of the staff will be meeting with many of the local jurisdictions along with the board members to talk more about that program. All of these programs, and including a fee adjustment potentially on the permitting fees, getting more administrative admin. I know we're time constrained, so I don't want to go into detail. What's really important is that these revenues are critical and essential to maintain our existing programs, not necessarily launch a bunch of new programs, but just to shore up that structural deficit I was talking about, to keep the team we have now, to keep the programs we have now, as well as hopefully leverage some additional monies, particularly in the Measure A arena or the per capita, to attract more of those incentive dollars to the region and leverage that. So for every $1 we get here, we can potentially leverage $4 to $5 of incentives into the region. This is a forecast projection chart. And what this shows is on the yellow line, as you see, we're going to trend down over the next year. We don't see any of those revenues coming into our budget until 2021. And so for the first year, if we use all the reserves that are projected for the first year, we will see a use of those reserves. But we'll start to level off and we'll start to climb back if we see those revenues come in. If we don't see those revenues come in, that is the blue line, right, steeply down. Obviously, the district would not allow that to happen. We would have to take steps to intervene on that and to mitigate that, which would mean all those programs we just talked about, a lot of the core programs we have now, check before you burn, some of the programs we don't receive any direct funding for, our complaints program, some of our permitting, enforcement activities, we would have to curve all of those back to try to accommodate, that gap to level out the budget. So with that, I wanted to just briefly mention the proposed fee schedule. You do have as part of your packet, we have our initial fees and our annual renewal fees, and they are increasing per a rule that we have in place that does allow us to bring it to the board for a CPI increase of 3.6%. We are recommending that go into play. That would generate about $200,000 in the stationary source arena for revenues. As I said, we are losing some revenue from that program, so this will help shore that up given the loss of some of our bigger sources. So with that, I understand that was very quick, and I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I would like to ask the board to open and close the public hearing, provide direction to the team, to us, on this budget and proposed budget to bring back to you in May for adoption of the final budget on May 23rd. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have Board Member Natoli signed up to speak here.
Yeah, thanks, Jamil, and thanks to our staff. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of information beyond just budgetary that's included in the document. And it was on one of your slides, but I had noted it in my review of the material. And it's actually a little new information, I guess. Maybe the Budget Committee took it up. But when you looking at the potential new funding strategies, and it's on page 21 of the budget, but it was on one of your slides. And that relates to, I guess, some consideration, maybe in addition to the conversation we had earlier in the year, as it relates to and it's actually on page 20 as well, but collecting a fee from homes with fireplaces. Mm-hmm. And it's been over a decade since we prohibited any open fireplace construction in the county. Obviously, if you have certain types of devices, pellet stoves and so forth. I would just say that, I don't know in what context you're going to bring this. I get the Check Before You Burn program, which is a good program, and I know it doesn't have a direct funding source behind it. I will think that will be, I would just want to give an early alert. Maybe staff has anticipated that will be very controversial, and some of us may have more homes with older fireplaces, but a lot of your older suburban communities, your rural areas of this county. And I know that we had quite a healthy discussion at the time. We decided we were, as Air District, with our respective jurisdictions, no longer going to allow for fireplace construction. But to go in and, again, dependent upon use, a lot of folks don't use them any longer, but nonetheless, they're there, they can be used. And I would just say that as you're looking at this and whatever committee structures, has looked at this, that was new to me in the context of discussion, because we talked about asbestos in remodels for single-family homes, for sheetrock and such. But I guess this is the first time I'd seen this particular idea emerge. And I just want to say that if we're not building a budget around it. This is a multi-million-dollar budget that has a small component. I trust we'll have the opportunity to have a very full discussion before this board, because again, I think whatever money that might generate, some of the goodwill I think we built in this community, certainly in promoting clean air, we can get a lot of, I think, very negative feedback from folks, maybe some positive feedback from folks who don't want fireplaces at all, but that's an amenity that goes in people's homes, and for folks that have had homes that are built 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago, and then somehow we're going to say, well, guess what, for having that you're going to be charged a fee annually or otherwise, and I don't know what the concept is behind it. I don't want to belabor it today. That's not the point of the budget, but I wanted to point that out, just to give you an early alert, because I hadn't talked with any of the staff about this. So.
Well, thank you, Director Natoli, and we really appreciate the input. This was really more of a brainstorming exercise at the Budget Committee. We wanted to give an example of what those types of fees could look like, and through our brainstorm, one was, yes, these are the type of fees that we are allowed to impose. Clearly, we have not fully developed that. That would come back to the Budget Committee process if that particular idea was to go forward. So thank you, and I'm sorry that it came across as more of a concrete concept.
It didn't.
So.
No, it didn't. I wasn't saying that at all. But it was in material. We had the discussion earlier last year, and I know I sat in the Budget Committee for a couple of years, and we had that other ideas that were floated, but this made it into print, and so I wanted to call that out in particular. So.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Board Member Natoli. Before we move on to any other comments, do we have anybody signed up to speak then?
No, we do not.
Okay, good. Then I think, want to thank my members who are on the Budget Committee as well. The direction of ensuring that we get full cost recovery and looking at that moving forward, and as far as our recommendations, I do want to thank our staff for being prudent about making sure that we're not going over and above and beyond. We're trying to execute the actual service that we're providing, and also being diligent with working with our individual city managers about if we do have a conversation about per capita, what does that mean to every jurisdiction, and how we would move forward on that. And I think there's some more work that needs to happen on that part, but at least at the very for this board member, ensuring that we get full cost recovery and right sizing our fees is appropriate. With that, if there are no other questions, I'll ask for a motion to open and close the public hearing. It's been moved by Board Member Hanson and seconded by Board Member Gaylord. Harris, yes. Supervisor Hanson over here. And any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay, measure passes. We'll see you guys at the next hearing on our budget. Okay, we're going to move back to the balance of our APCO report. I wanted to make sure we had the conversation of green means go before we lost board members. But thank you, Dr. Ayala.
Mr. Garrett, just to be clear, my motion was not only to open and close the public hearing, but to set the budget for May 23rd hearing and adoption.
Was that? Do you concur with that, Mr. Gaylord? Is the clerk okay with that?
Just the staff
Council okay with that?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks for the clarity.
Appreciate the diligence. All right, I'll close this out real quick. The last two items are just a couple important FYIs for the board. One thing is, again, an exciting development in the world of mobility and transportation. Mr. Lemos and I had the pleasure of being able to be invited to Phoenix for the unveiling of this great technology. As you can see, it's a full Class 8 heavy-duty rig. It's going to haul 80,000 pounds across the nation, and it's fully zero emissions. It's not electric because you can't put a lot of batteries in things like this, but these commercial vehicles are going to be running on a fuel cell and hydrogen. And what we are working on is, how do we position Sacramento to be the rollout market so that we can begin to try these great technologies. And the angle we're exploring is we want a municipal fleet and we want a private fleet. So there's a lot of work that we're doing with our partners in the area to see if we can actually make this happen. But again, I wanted to share that with the board that some great developments in the commercial sector, which is the biggest source of emissions, a big source of emissions, and frankly, one of the toughest to address. And the last thing I wanted to share with you, again, is just as a means of giving you a legislative update. We were in support of Assembly Bill 1418, which has to do with pursuing faster and more electrification of the school buses. You should note that your district has deployed the largest fleet of zero-emission electric school buses in the nation. We put in place, thanks to Mr. Lemos's work and his team, we have a fleet of 27 electric school buses running in our region. But what's great about this is that we're anticipating bringing another 50 in the near term. So you can begin to see that pretty soon we're developing a critical mass in terms of being a real player. And I think this one checks all the boxes, right? I mean, it's zero emissions, it's new technology, you are advancing, pushing forward, and you're protecting our kids. So just wanted to make you aware. You have a copy of the bill in your package. Again, we were witnesses for Assemblymember Chewy, and we provided a support letter for 1418. It's not a done deal. There is some further questions and controversy, right? Because this is putting the utilities on notice that they need to help electrify school buses. But again, I wanted to share that with the board. Thank you. That concludes the APCR report.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ayala and Assemblymember Chu. That's the Chu with an I on there. Has been a big advocate for air quality. I'm glad that you guys we were there to represent. One side note on that piece, I do see that the future of our electric vehicles in partnership with our community college district, as we look at maintenance and repair and other jobs and ways that we can learn in our roles as council members, we look at economic development and workforce development and supervisors, and I do think that we should start looking at how do we address that workforce part in the future, because all of these buses are going to need some maintenance, and that's going to be a new pipeline of good careers that don't necessarily always require a 4-year degree, but are good paying jobs. And I have a board member Natoli also signed up to speak here.
Yeah, I kind of to piggyback on what you were talking about, Eric, not just on the jobs part, but I think in what you've talked about here this morning, and even in item 5, it was on the consent calendar, but you look at the areas of where we're looking at, the deployment of vehicles, the movement of people and goods, and I think it's exciting that we're attempting, certainly when it comes to your rigs that can haul 80,000 pounds, but school buses, farm equipment, locomotives. I mean, it's the full gamut, and obviously personal vehicles, and so again, I just want to commend our district certainly for not only keeping this board apprised, but I think you penetrate into many different areas of the community, both geographically, but certainly in various aspects of daily life, of work, certainly in travel, and so I think it shows this district certainly is a leader in many ways, and appreciate the effort you put forth. Thanks.
Thank you, Board Member Natoli. Yeah. Good. With that, if there's no other comments, do we have anyone signed up to speak in the public comment? Are there any board member ideas or comments? Any announcements? If not, then we'll go ahead and adjourn at 9:47 a.m.